Stay hungry, stay foolish.
As always, thank you to our partner Zai. Zai is a global fintech innovating within its area of expertise, building integrated financial services for digital native and non-native businesses. Check them out at hellozai.com. It's great to welcome back author of Built to Innovate, Essential Practices to Wire Innovation into Your Company's DNA. And we have a copy up for grabs for you. Just sign up to the innovationshow.io newsletter to win a copy of this wonderful book. You're joining us for part two. We're joined by Ben. Ben, welcome back. I hope you had a good week.
Well, thank you for having me again. I mean, this was a great talk we had last time. So.
Absolutely. And I was telling you, I finished editing last night. I insist on editing it myself because I learn so much from the content. So I will do our best not to repeat. But I think repeating is probably a good thing because we'll bring people back to where we were before. Just for context for our audience, what we talked about the last day was the BTI framework, the Built to Innovate framework. We talked about some of the challenges for leadership, for those people trying to sell their ideas within the organization. Today, we're going to talk about examples. So Ben does an amazing job in the book of bringing all the concepts to life, the BTI framework to life, and all the challenges that comes with that. So today, we'll be talking about companies like BASF, we'll be talking about Gore, we'll be talking about Bayer, and we'll be talking about Kordsa. Some great examples then from a wide range of history, but also from a wide range of different industries, particularly, as we said the last day, Kordsa, where you wouldn't expect to see much innovation. So with that, let's get into it. We'll dive into part one of the book by sharing your approach to innovating and the special characteristics and distinguishing features of the twin engines we talked about before, the execution engine and the innovating engine. And you begin by sharing the story of the German-based multinational and the world's largest chemical company, BASF. And just to give our audience a flavor of the size of this company, in a typical year, BASF invests more than $2 billion in R&D, supports 10,000 employees who are directly involved in product innovation, and generates 1,000 or more new products. Amazing company, very hidden from the innovation world, but some amazing examples and actually such a great exemplar of what you talk about in this book. So over to you to tell us about this brilliant company.
Well, I like the examples in BASF because it is really at the core of what the book is about. Is really creating, as I refer to it, an innovating engine that supplements and complements your R&D. I mean, we're talking about BASF. A powerhouse in R&D, developing new chemicals, new products out of the R&D department, and yet they understood that they need to compete in a very, very tough environment, being squeezed on most of their products. They had to leverage the capability of everyone. So they really kind of systematically started by building an infrastructure. So with the support of the board, they created an internal initiative called Perspective. So in the beginning, it started in the marketing area. And then it was so successful. And in the marketing area, it was there supposed simply to help train people in customer orientation. And it became such a success that first they started to introduce new initiatives around innovation and actually expand it beyond marketing to englobe all the departments within the company. So if I want to go into the detail, what they were training people into is understanding the customer, and they would put the perspective to understand this is an internal unit, totally staffed. And I remember interviewing some people who were part of Perspective. These were kind of very young, successful executives who understood that this was a fast track to get to succeed in the company. So people would stay within the Perspective initiative for a few years. They would help develop new tools. So this is what Perspective was doing, developing new tools, new processes, new methodologies around customer orientation and around innovation. And then they would be sent to the local operations to help jumpstart innovation and customer orientation. And then very often, this was a quick path to success, because the local businesses would bring these people back in as managers running the business. So this was really an initiative with very bright and brilliant people. And so they started with this initiative trying to understand what type of customers they have. So they looked at the whole range of their customers, and you can imagine BASF having hundreds of different customers. And they created a classification, if you will, a classification of all of their customers into 6 categories, which could go from the most kind of basic, let's say, commodity type kind of products that you can actually have a general contract for that product. And then the customer would just kind of order on an electronic market. So this is really a commodity kind of market type of a relationship with the customer, all the way to very, very, let's say, almost strategic alliances, partnerships they would have with the customer, where their engineers would get involved together in the design and even in research. So they would have 6 buckets in which they could put most of their products. And then it totally reorganized the customer service organization from an organization which was by products into an organization by relationships, by type of relationships. They call it customer interaction model. And what this would do is that for each of these interaction models, they would have processes and structures to manage the relationship. So this was a very powerful way to change the culture in the organization from product focused to relationship focused. And this is where then they started to introduce research and innovation into the equation. So they had, let me highlight a couple of other processes, and then I'll give you an example of what was the result of all this. So they had another process which was developed and then, propagated, kind of cascaded into organization by this group called Perspective, was this process called Pathfinder. So they would, for each business unit division, they would have cross-functional teams work together to better understand their customers. So, and then they would try to understand what is the business of the customer, what are the trends affecting the customer, their competitors, their value chain, what are their key processes. And then they would engage with this amplified knowledge of the customer, systematic knowledge, where these people would be trained. It's almost like, consultants in a consulting firm. They would learn about strategy, about their customer. And then with this heightened understanding of the customer, they would engage with the customer in these new types of relationships where they would work together to actually find out how they can create more value for the customer. So what I'm trying to describe here is that BASF started by creating a structure, something that was structural, a group of people who had specific tasks and responsibilities. And these people developed tools, processes, and then they trained people across the organization. Then what they did is that they had these processes that were embedded at the business unit level. And this over time created what I would kind of call a culture. It changed the relationship and the way that people would think about how to work with a customer. And there are two spaces that they created in a sense that are very important to innovating. they closed the gap between the innovators in the company and the people who know about the customer. So specifically, they closed the gap between the scientists, the engineers, and the R&D people, and the marketing and sales people. As these people were going through the training through perspective, they developed an understanding of each other. They developed common tools to work together. The second space that they created is that they closed the gap between, so the first gap I was talking about is the internal gap, okay? And people very often underestimate the importance of this gap when you're trying to innovate, the gap between your internal R&D, let's say, and your marketing and sales. That's very important. And many organizations are siloed, and these people don't talk to each other. I've seen cases where people hate each other. They can't work together. So you have to close that gap. And that stimulates innovation. The second one is between you as an organization and your customer. And they were able to close the gap, especially for those, you remember I said there were 6 interaction models, 6 types of relationships. So for the high-end relationships where they do co-design, co-development, they call it a co-creation model. So you co-create innovation with your customers. So let me give you maybe one or two quick examples. So if I remember, the first example is about a sole, a product, a material developed for sole for running shoes.
For Adidas,
so,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, for Adidas. So this is one of those examples you often hear about where you have the serendipity come in. So I think it started with a chemist at BASF called, I think, Prisok. I think his name was Frank Prisok. And he was working with a product that, of course, is very familiar to BASF. I think it's called polyethylene, thermal polyethylene. And he had noticed, again, serendipitously, that when this product, which is used, by the way, for electric cables, so this is something that is very, very familiar for BASF engineers, that if you put it under certain pressure and heat, it would kind of transform into a foam that would have little, I think, bubbles, a little bit like if you're popping popcorn in a microwave. Now, of course, as an engineer, I mean, he didn't know what was the use for this. He had no idea. This is not what he was working on. And this is where culture, you can see that culture changes. In the old days, he would have kind of, let it go and keep doing his work. But as a result of the training I was talking about, of the new tools and this space, this gap that was closed between the engineers, the R&D people, and the marketing, he didn't do that. When we talk about norms, it's what is a good definition is the things you do when nobody's watching, right? Nobody was watching him. But Frank Prisok, he created small, short videos of this this kind of invention, or what he had observed, and he didn't know what it meant. But he made videos, and he started to send them around the company to the people in marketing and sales, and of course, at some point, one person, I think his name was Martin Vallow, he came across these videos and he immediately saw the link between this new foam, which nobody knew what to do with at BASF, and he linked it with the possibility to maybe develop something for soles for running shoes. Okay, and then as they say, the rest is history. I think the critical thing was this connection, the chemist who stumbled onto something he didn't understand, and he made short videos, sent them around. Somebody in the marketing and sales department who also kind of knew about this new culture approached Adidas. In fact, approached many running shoe manufacturers, and Adidas picked on it, and they developed a new sole that had actually, this is important. That's where the rubber hits the road, as they say. The sole had a very special functionality. It had it was resistant. It was temperature resistant and all that. But more importantly, it had a rebound effect, which was something that runners really were looking for. And this is the way that Adidas, in collaboration with BASF together, and of course, this is the co-creation process. The ping pong going back and forth, working together, they developed this sole that was launched as a product called Boost. As a matter of fact, I forget if it was a year after or two, the world record for marathon was broken using the Boost sole. So this is the story. But I think the critical thing here to understand is how, through perspective, BASF, so a structure, processes, was able to change the norms and change the culture.
I just wanted to map some of these concepts back to what we talked about the last day. There was two major concepts you talked about. One was giving the organization permission to innovate, to permission to come up with ideas. And I really got the impression of that through this perspectives model and the Pathfinder model in BASF, but also what you talked about the last day, the power of thank you. So thank you for bringing your ideas. And that in turn changes the mindset and the culture, like you said, where the scientist comes along this solution, but then puts it out looking for a problem. And, many times, if you think about the tragedy of that, how many times in organizations people have found a solution for which they cannot find a problem. And this is where that interface, the people who are in touch with clients are constantly seeing problems. And when they start to then connect with people in the organization, the problems and the solutions meet, and then you have a new product or service. But I wanted to bring it to one thing, because you say of the new product that was created, you say BASF shifted to a more outside-in approach. And rather than starting their experimentation with new molecules they hope will have some practical value, they start with the expressed needs of the customers and then collaborate with those customers at every step of the process to ensure that every experiment, test, and redesign is focused on producing a product with powerful market appeal. And that was the story of Boost. But I wanted to emphasize something earlier that you mentioned, because I've seen this, and I'm sure you've experienced it in your vast experience in the past, that having shown themselves to be world-class experts in their fields in BASF, company managers and employees began to doubt that anyone outside the organizational walls had much to teach them. And we see this quite a lot with outside consultants. When the industry you work in is intensely competitive, the desire to safeguard your valuable intellectual property can easily lead to an emphasis on secrecy, which only increases the reluctance to engage in freewheeling discussions and explorations with outsiders like consultants, even when those outsiders are important company stakeholders. I thought that was a key point before you give the second Basotec example, and I'd love your opinion on that one.
I think this was very important. I think this is where the I suppose the turning point was for BASF when they realized that facing the competition that they had, it was not sufficient to just develop internally, think that they would develop the right molecules and hope that they would hit the market. They understood that it was really a question of listening to the customer and then developing the solutions that are responding to the customer's problem. And I think what is also important is that you give permission, of course, and everybody understands it. And I think the message was very clear. But I think you have to also give the means, the processes, build something concrete that translate this permission into a change of behavior and into new ideas. So this is what I was trying to explain with the perspective project. And by the way, I can highlight similar initiatives in other companies. So this is a theme that I saw across many companies, that when they are trying to create their innovation engine, one very important thing is to create an entity legitimized by the board, by the senior executives, which is responsible very often in training coaches, in developing new processes related to innovation, and to cascade them, spread them through the organization. Coach, follow the middle managers, help the middle managers to understand and get their teams to understand these teams. And this is what Perspective did. So I think that this outside in perspective has meat because of this training that people would get. And the training, I insist, is that it was given to everybody. And then this is how people in marketing would have a better respect for people in R&D and HR and everybody else. And that's why people like Frank Prisok and Martin Vallow would have these kind of behaviors. I think this is a very complex point, because when you say you want to give permission to people to innovate, but concretely, people have to change the way they behave. And you change the behavior of people through structural forms, through processes, through cultural events. But this was what I was trying to explain with the perspective. By the way, I will say one more thing about perspective. What is interesting is that perspective has became known by everybody within BASF. Within BASF, everybody knew what perspective was about. People were familiar with a toolkit that Perspective had developed and trained people and cascaded inside the company, called Key Perspective Concept, KPCs. And in 2017, as a matter of fact, Perspective as a formal organization was stopped. It was stopped because it had done its job. It had created the new norms. It had created the new behavior, to the point that now the key perspective concepts are taught to any new hire. Any new professional hire in BASF, he's trained in these key perspective concepts that were developed through the perspective entity. And now, of course, there are still some coaches, if teams or individuals need support for an innovation project, there's now a consulting unit, if you will. Perspective became some sort of a consulting unit within BASF that does other things than simply innovation. But you can see that once the innovation engine has been created, you've changed the behavior of people, then you just have to find a form to maintain the habit, if you will. So just to give you the other example, which is, again, this time starting with marketing, so this is a product called Basotec. It's a foam which is used in I think mostly in the construction business because it has very good isolation properties, especially sound and thermal properties. And it is, again, one of those accidents. I was told that a salesperson once was making a presentation to happens to be a Japanese construction company. I don't know the name of the construction company, but apparently somebody spilled some coffee on the table. And there were, of course, construction blueprints on the table, and it kind of created a little bit of a panic, and one of the people just grabbed what they could, which was like a flob. A flob, you say a flob, a piece of Basotec foam that was lying on the table, and wiped the coffee away. And then a salesperson noticed that actually not only the coffee was taken away, but actually the ink on the blueprints had disappeared. And again, he thought this was a very interesting phenomenon. Didn't know what to do with it. So again, in the old culture, in the old BASF, what do you say, inside out culture, he would have just continued his life as before. But in the new culture, with the new norms, with this new space bringing the customer and the BASF together, bringing the salespeople and the R&D people, he looked around the company to see if somebody could be interested in this new property of Basotec that people had noticed about. And then, as I said before, it became history because somebody in R&D kind of realized that this is a property they could maybe use, and they actually found that I think it's P&G was very interested in that kind of property, and I actually was very curious about this product myself. It became Magic, as it's called, Magic Cleaner. It's a very profitable division within P&G. So I'm going fast because in between there was lots of co-creation between BASF and P&G to develop this new product called Magic Cleaner, and there are different forms of it. But I was asking my wife about it, and I discovered that we do have that product in the kitchen. So it is a magic cleaner, basically. But this is a very good example again of how you change norms. You give permission. This is very important. Without giving permission to innovate, people won't do it, won't feel the motivation to do it. But then you have to create a structure. You have to train people. You have to create processes for this to happen. And this is what I mean by creating an innovating engine. This is something just like the execution engine. This is something that has a structure, which means that some people have some tasks and some responsibilities. You have some processes that are embedded. So like I said, now the hiring process has changed at BASF as a result of this. Everybody is trained in these new innovation tools, and it creates, it has its own unique culture where, people, without being watched, they just make a video and send it to everybody. Or the marketing person who sees something strange just talks to the engineers about it. I think this is where you can see that your engine is humming now.
It's a fantastic story, and I wanted to just highlight a couple of things. If you map this to any kind of upgrade in consciousness, so what I mean there is, one of the things I talk about in my own book is that you can't change business models until you change mental models. So you can't change what people do until you change how they think. And that really came to life for me with the BASF story, because of those people you mentioned, they were trained in new mental models. So if you think of them as mental buckets in which to put these phenomena when they arise, because otherwise they just won't see them because they're so busy executing that they won't see opportunity. And this brings me then to business models, because BASF not only innovated with products but also with business models. And you said they have become one of the world's masters of business model innovation, finding ways to rethink and redesign the entire array of relationships, processes, and systems that produce economic value for BASF, its customers, and all its stakeholders. You go on to say, and I'd love you to expand on this, it is estimated that it takes an average of 8 to 10 years to change a long-established business model. The way BASF business model for providing paints and other coating materials to auto manufacturers has evolved over the years. they've totally changed the business as well as the products they produce, but also the business models through which they sell those. It's a really important aspect of all this that I'd love you to expand upon.
Yes. If you allow me, I just want to kind of rebound on what you said about mental models. I think this is very important, and this is core to the story of BSF. And actually, we're talking about the BSF, but it is replicated in many of the other examples in the book. But here you start by creating this new consciousness, if you will. Already when you have the board supporting the initiative, when people know that we're shifting from inside out to outside in, that is already starting to prompt the new mental models. But what reinforces that is the fact that people have tools and people have a language to talk about these new mental models. And this is what I think is the power of perspective and the frameworks and the concept and the actual tools like the SIM model, the Pathfinder. They use some tools that they gleaned from innovation kind of methodologies like Blue Ocean Strategy and others. But I think without the tools, you cannot actually translate it into concrete action as well. So I think it starts with mental models and then mindsets, and then people need the vehicle. So what is really interesting about the business model innovation at BSF, it is a natural extension of all the work they did within perspective on what they call the SIM model, the customer interaction model, which is these 6 types of relationships basically. And I said the most basic one is electronic markets, arm's length type of relationships, all the way to the models like let's say 4, 5, and 6, which are much more intricate relationships. Closer relationships where they develop specialized product for their customers, or they develop products together, all the way to the kind of relationship they have, for instance, with we were talking about Adidas, where they could do co-creation together. So the way the business model innovated was a very natural result of this partnership, this close relationship they were developing, for instance, with the automakers. So it started like for many in this industry with arm's length relationships where the automakers would specify what kind of paints or coating they needed, and then all the suppliers would try to comply and compete basically on price. But thanks to this closer space where they close the gap between them and some of the automakers, in particular the top tier ones like Mercedes-Benz, they realized that number one, the price, they were not making much profit out of it as BSF. And on the other hand, the automakers didn't really know much about coating and about paints to the point where they could make very sophisticated decisions about what they need for their own products, and also in terms of applying those paints in their plants. They're not specialists of coating. They don't know they don't know much about coating. So clearly there was an opportunity to work together to as a win-win, if you will. So this is how BSF started to work with Mercedes-Benz in particular to, for instance, send people, consultants, on the plants of Mercedes-Benz to advise and consult with the factory workers as they were applying the coating and the paint to the vehicles. So that was the first step. And they would also send some of their chemists to help the automakers design teams when they were designing new cars. They were discussing what kind of coating and what kind of paints would be suitable for their products. They would have chemists from BSF join them there. So you can see that the relationship became closer, and then it kept evolving to the point where now you have some BASF teams directly on the plant, in the plants of Mercedes-Benz and some other automakers, taking full responsibility for the finishing of the cars. So you can see that they went from a completely arm's length type of relationships to a new business model where BASF is taking full responsibility of one of the key processes critical to delivering a car to a customer. So this is one interesting way where they were able to do what we call business model innovation in a very, let's say, progressive way. It is not necessarily a disruption. It is an evolution where, by working closer, again, this is the same outside in mindset, as you were saying, and it is a result of that mindset that led them to actually look for opportunities to work closer with their customers in a win-win situation where the customer, the automaker, gets better paints and better coating for their vehicles, and BASF is actually making better margins on their paints than if they were just selling the commodity product. So I think that's a very interesting lesson in business model innovation, which we don't hear about, which is this evolutionary movement towards a new type of relationship. But they didn't stop there. And I remember talking to Uwe Hardwick, which was the person who took the head of perspective after Andres Jaffe, who started it a long time ago. And what he did is that he worked with business analysts at the University of St. Gallen, where they basically did a full-blown analysis of BASF processes and tried to codify and map theoretically all the theoretical business models that were possible for a company like BASF. So they did some sort of a top-down kind of a deductive kind of analysis of, from a totally theoretical point of view, mathematical point of view, what are all the business models possible for BASF? And they came up with actually 45 business models. And then what they did is basically, armed with this 45, they had little kind of printed cards to represent each of these business models. They audited the whole business. And this is still ongoing. They go to all the business units around the world and try to audit which business models they are actually implementing against these 45 theoretical business models. And they were quite surprised, positively surprised, that they already have independently implemented 30 out of 45. So as they go business unit by business unit, they check which business model are being used and whether this is the appropriate business model given the market and the customer. And if it is not satisfactory, then they can think about which other one to implement. But for me, this is again, of course, it was on purpose that I introduced these examples to show that innovating, as I say, is about innovating in everything you do. It can be indeed innovating in your products, have a better molecule, have a better paint, but it can be also better services, as they do for the automakers. But it can be also innovation in your internal functions. So they completely, for me, there's a huge organizational innovation within BASF when they implemented this new customer organization, which was focused on relationships instead of products. I mean, people don't realize, but from an organizational point of view, it's a huge endeavor to retrain, retool everybody, create new roles, new responsibilities. For me, that's innovation. That's organizational innovation. And then they went all the way to innovate relationships. So they innovated their relationship with their customers, and then they went all the way to innovating the business model. So for me, that's what innovating is about, is innovating in everything you do.
There's so much in that, even if you take, for example, getting close to your customer, you mentioned there, for example, working with Mercedes in the factory, it creates a camaraderie there that is almost like a really good customer service aspect, where you create a bond with the customer, they have a switching cost. It's not only just about cost anymore, it's about relationships, and it's very difficult to break all that. I thought that about the value of that outside-in relationship. That was one thing. The second was, I often think about this, Ben, as the innovation Peter principle. You know, the Peter principle, where you get hired to your level of incompetence. So why did I hired Ben as manager? Why is he doing such a crappy job as manager? And you kind of go, well, have you given him any coaching on how to be a manager? Because that's a very different aspect. That's a very different skill than his level of expertise that got him to that position. And I think the same with innovation is, like, you can't expect somebody, because of their position in a hierarchy, to suddenly become innovative, because they lack the mental models to even think that way. So it all comes down to what you said. There was a huge organizational investment in the entire ecosystem to create the culture. It wasn't just a change in behaviors or mindsets. It was actually massive investment, and the dividends are there. The payback is massive. But of all that, I say, one of the things that people were given were the gift of time to apply to these new mindsets and to spot opportunities where they were, for a moment, they had their eyes off the execution prize and they were going into innovating mode. And one of the great exemplars, you touched on this earlier on, is Gore. And I'm going to set you up here for Gore as our next example. You said one of the practices pioneered under Bill Gore's leadership was that of encouraging all the employees, associates, as they were and still are called, to spend 10% of their time dabbling in projects that appealed to them. Over time, Gore's Dabble Time system produced some of the biggest business successes enjoyed by the enterprise. The term that Gore prefers is enterprise, not business. Some of the most famous innovative breakthroughs in Gore's illustrious history had their origins in Dabble Time projects launched by individual associates. I thought that would be a good way to set you up for both the luxury of time with innovation, but also the deliberate impact of giving people permission to spend time on innovating.
It is essential. I think when we talk about giving permission, in fact, one way to speak about it is, and I use this quote very often, even for myself. I spent a day once walking in the forest of Fontainebleau with one of the board members of Allianz. His name is Jan Karendi, and we were talking about innovation. And along the way, he said something like, people to innovate, they need three things. He said they need to feel that they are able, that they need to feel capable, and they need to feel motivated. And what he meant by able, he meant allowed to. So this is what I call give permission. But if you just give permission, that's nice and dandy, but you need the second one, which is basically that they need to feel capable. And to be capable, they need to have time. You can't tell them, yeah, you're allowed to innovate, but and this is something I see very often when I do work with companies, training or coaching or consulting for companies. There's this special project where people are working with me, and at some point, the team has to interview customers or visit non-customers, do some work. And inevitably, at some point, I get some of the participants who email me or call me that they haven't been able to do, some of the homework, if you will. They consider it as homework. And when we ask what went on, is basically they had their boss call them and say, what are you doing? You should deliver. You should execute. So if you don't, you can give permission to people, but if you don't give them the time, they don't. It's even worse than that. It's not only that you lost the opportunity that people could come up with a good idea, is that people become cynical. When you encourage them to innovate and all that, they say, but you don't put your word where you, what do you say in English? You don't put your words where your mouth is, or
walk the talk.
Oh, you don't walk the talk. I mean, there's an expression, I think, in American English also about that. But this is very important. I mean, people, if they don't have the time, they cannot do it. So capable means have the time. Capable means have the training. I mean, you can give them the time and you can give them the permission. But if they don't know, that's the second complaint I get from people, is that they say, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do it. I'm not a creative type. I don't know how to do this. So they need to have time. They need to have training. They need to have resources. I mean, of course, time is the first one. And then we can talk later about the motivation. We talked already about it with the thank you and the questions. But it is very important that people feel that they have this time. And again, we know quite a number of stories a la Gore, where you have 10% double time, or I think 3M had also 10%. Other companies have 15%. I think that's one thing, to give time to people. But there's another also way to do it, is to create the time for them. And this is what I mean by the creating a habit, is to make sure that people are involved on a regular basis. And this is mostly the job of middle managers, to make sure that their key people are involved in some sort of innovating activity on a regular basis. This is more a question of training the muscle than necessarily getting great ideas every time. But the task can be very simple. Can be, for instance, if there's a project team going on somewhere at corporate level, one of your staff could be a representative of a function or department in a cross-functional team. I mean, we talk about diversity. So just being one element of that diversity is part of an innovating activity. I think what is really core is what you said earlier. It is about the mindset. When we talk about time, it's not time, physical time, it's time as a mindset. So I tell sales, I mean, I've interviewed some of the, top salespeople in some companies. I mean, they are able to spend 10 minutes in a sales call in innovating mode. It's as simple as switching your mindset, your mental model, when you're engaging with a customer. Instead of being in what I always call the tell mode or sell mode, just switch your mind and say, for 10 minutes, I'm going to try to listen to this person with empathy, try to understand what are they struggling with, what is their life like. For me, that's already innovating time. And then, of course, the middle managers can create this time, and it can be very simple, just spending time with a customer, as I said, with empathy, or non-customer. How many times do people go and explore, or examine, or I don't know if I can. Maybe I can tell you, just to show you how simple it can be. I can tell you the example of Starwood. This is the global hospitality company. So Starwood once had an event in Paris, and they had 700 attendees at this event. And so being in Paris, INSEAD got involved to just talk a little bit about innovation. So we gave the people a few kind of simple tools. And then what we did, we split the 700 people, attendees, in 64 teams. And then we gave them notebooks, and cameras, and sent them roaming in the streets of Paris to just roam around and look for experiences, look for, trying to better understand their customer. And 3 hours later, they came back, and we started to kind of collect what they had, what kind of insights and stories they had identified. Collectively, they came up with 1,700 ideas, new ideas. I mean, most of those ideas were just like small improvements on existing processes or products, but a few actually were important enough that they became global projects, and some of them ended up in effective products, like I think some new product called Fantastic, which is an approach to developing products for families, focused on the needs of the kids, not the parents. But this is just to give you an example of what kind of activity it can be. When we took the feedback from the people, I mean, these are 700 frontline managers in hotels. These are not the new product development people, and these were not innovation experts, and yet they came up with 1,700 new ideas. And I mean, it will stay with me. There was one feedback where somebody said, I didn't think I was a creative type, but now I think I can do it. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, is to create time. I mean, it can be formalized as double time, or it can be regular activities that people have to do as part. See, this is the thing, is that it has to become part of your job. It is not because you have a special privilege or no, it's part of your job. And of course, now the other issue is that once you internalize the thinking, the mindset, once you internalize some of the tools, very simple tools we're talking about, then you don't need to separate the time, because you understand what I'm saying? You can do it almost at the same time. But of course, to start the engine, you need to formalize the time. Send people to training, give them regular space and time. Now you have lots of companies that create hackathons, create challenges. They have like special rooms like labs or garage, where they take people from across the company and put them in this space, time and physical space, where they are given permission to innovate. They are given tools. So this is what we're talking about. And I'm very much encouraged, listening to many companies. Of course, some of them are very proactive about creating this space, formalizing it, a little bit like Gore. They even go beyond and create space where they can bring their customers to work with their people. They have this new research center where they call their customers to come, and they have this special AI application where their people can talk with the customers and try to understand the problem and use the AI application to find out whether Gore has a product that matches the need. So these are the kind of spaces and times that you need to create for people to feel that they are actually given permission. So we said they need to feel able, have permission. They need to feel capable, have the time and the space. and the tools and the training and the support. By the way, when I say support, I mean political support. This is something that people underestimate. They need to have the political support when they're going on a project. And then the third one is really about motivating people, making sure that people feel that they want to contribute their ideas. And one way is to start by saying thank you.
Yeah, I love it, Ben. And I wanted to get to the Gore process of sifting ideas or triaging the ideas, real win worth. But before that, I just wanted to highlight something that I found. You alluded to this, was it's nearly easier to bake in these processes like 10% dabble time into a new organization than it is to put into an organization where it didn't exist before. Because as Peter Drucker said famously, you can't do something new without stopping doing something old. And that's the difficulty, because you get a lot of times, organizations I work with on mindset and mental models, what often happens is you can see it, particularly in a Zoom environment, that it's a struggle for people to be present. And I mean mentally present. No matter how good the training is, it's actually, I have such a to-do list and I need this thing like a hole in the head, because yes, the organization says we need to be more innovative, but at the same time, the workload keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we get this kind of cynicism as well in resilience training. People say, for example, oh, the organization is just trying to get us to be more resilient so we can handle a higher workload. And it's really difficult there, because a leader backed by a board needs to stand up and say, look, enough is enough. We need to lighten the load on people in order to create literally time capacity and mental capacity for them to be able to invest in thinking. Like, you know, how few people actually can sit through and read a book. I know this. I know from talking to so many people, they have great intentions, a bunch of books sitting on a bedside dresser, never read. Something like 80 or 90% of business books are never read. And then you have these tools that are useful to an extent, which are summary tools, summarizing books. But the problem with that is you only get to a superficial level of understanding and you never actually get into building your own mental model. And it's so difficult.
Yes. I think this is, I call this, and I insist, for instance, for my MBA students, for instance, when we work on projects, is to, I tell them to spend some thinking time. They struggle with writing a paper, and I said, don't do any reading anything. Just go in the forest, because we have a beautiful forest in around Fontainebleau on our campus. I tell them, just take some time, go walk in the forest, and spend some thinking time. I think this is what I think you're referring to. People don't take the time to step out. But by the way, I'm kind of listening to both of us, and I realized that we are touching on the three processes. All the things I've been talking about, and creating the time, giving permission, is really about the creation process. But I think that if these ideas emerge and are not channeled, are not winnowed, selected, and moved through a process to be tested, to be maybe prototyped, I mean, they're not going to become an idea that will go into the execution engine. So this is the role of very often of the middle managers and the integration process. So this is the somewhat stage gates process that Gore calls, real win worth. Other companies do the same. All these processes by which the ideas that are created, once you give permission, the time and the space, people are going to generate ideas. So that's what I call the raw material of innovation. But what do you do with it? So all of these ideas alone, some are brilliant and can transform into a new process or a new product, but very often they need to go through some sort of elaboration process, testing process, selection process. And you need these different stages. And most of the time, most of the companies I've seen, it's some form of a stage gate process, basically, where you start with a lot of ideas, you put them through some sort of a set of criteria, which leads to a smaller number, which can now be combined with other ideas, and then move on until a few are left to go through some pilot testing or prototyping before they are allocated some major funding for to transform them in a potential result or outcome. I can mention an interesting story about Corsa. I forget if we talked about Corsa
we did, but go first.
Okay, so I mean, but people will remember that Corsa is this Turkish company which makes fabric to reinforce tires. Commodity product for the tire company, for the tire business, and Cenk Alper, when he created his innovating engine, he used a similar stage gate process, but what he had instituted in the beginning is he called it positive discrimination. He would alleviate the traditional profit pressure on new ideas for the first 5 years, for them to kind of find their market and fine-tune their operational model before they start to actually start to make profits. So you have different models where people start to democratize innovation, but then have a discipline. This is the other thing, is that very often I hear people say that, we are innovating, so we don't have any, you remember we talked about how the senior leaders can help with the creation process, but you need standards, you need criteria, you need targets. And this is embodied in these stage gate processes. As Gore say, it could be a brilliant idea, but if it's not worth it, if it's not going to make money for the company, maybe we should not support it. And then I think there was an important point in what you said, which is the role of senior leaders in making sure that they put innovation at the center of the strategy. And they are the ones, when we say they have to give permission, that's exactly what you were saying there, is that they have to tell people, you have to do innovation, but you have to let go of something. What are we going to stop doing? As you said, you can't just ask people to spend more time. Even if I would, argue that at some point people, if they internalize the tools and the mindset, they are able to innovate almost on a natural basis, but they can't do that in the beginning. You need to actually create a protected, that's why I call the innovating engine a protected, fully legitimized space that tells people, okay, when you are innovating, you are fully legitimate. You don't have to feel that you have to ask for permission or feel guilty because you are given permission. So I think that's the role of the senior leaders to create the frame. And one thing I like to do when I train teams for innovation is to insist on the mindset. And people very often underestimate the importance of trying to capture the current mindset. People want to go to innovation immediately without trying to, as I say, you can't think out of the box if you don't understand what the box is. So I insist very often that people, and this is very useful for people to know what they can stop doing, is to take stock of what are the current assumptions. What are the current beliefs that we collectively have about the customer, about the industry, about what we're doing, how we're creating value? I use very simple tools to try to get people to understand what is the value that they think they're creating for the customer today. And they can very quickly, and then we have this tool which came out of a Blue Ocean strategy, which I call ERIC. ERIC, people always ask me, how do you know that you have a good idea? I say, just ask ERIC. ERIC means what should we eliminate that everybody takes for granted? What should we eliminate from what we're doing? What should we reduce? What should we do more or less of than from the standard that is currently going on? And then, of course, people think that innovation is about increasing, Eric, and creating. But innovation is very much about eliminating and reduction. And that goes for the innovation, but also it goes for people who are trying to innovate. So I really want to rebound on your notion that you cannot tell people just to innovate. It will drive, again, cynicism, because people feel, they're trying to squeeze even more from us. And I think people have to kind of, starting from the top level, people understand that innovation is important enough that you have to create this protected, legitimized space to do it, and all of us.
When you were saying about like the filtering of ideas or the stage gate, one of the things that often concerns me when I do that work myself with customers, with clients, is that what if they discard of an idea that's great, but just is not of its time? So I asked them to try and capture them somewhere that they can be revisited. And I found this beautiful notion in the ant kingdom. So in ants, when they explore down certain holes or they explore certain parts of an environment, they leave a pheromone, and the pheromone signals this has been explored already. And it reminded me very much of this idea that, because say, for example, I'm working in Gore and my idea gets filtered out, but it's a good idea, but it's just not ready yet because the environment hasn't changed. Maybe it's pre-COVID times. And now all of a sudden it's a very valuable idea. But oftentimes there's no resource to be able to go and find those ideas for the rest of the organization. What suggestions have you got there for people?
Well, I love this. We might have touched about it a little bit when we talked about the three processes and how can the frontline innovators help with the integration process. And this is where they can have a role. And of course, there could be some support from the organization because they generate ideas. They have networks, social networks. They meet people. Customers. They meet people in the cross functional teams. So they develop their own kind of social network as innovators. But what happens to those ideas? So I don't know if we'll have time in part 9 or 10. I don't know, maybe to talk
episode
about
26.
In chapter 10, I describe a 7-step process, innovating process methodology that I've developed over the last 15 years. So I said earlier, there's a part where you systematically take stock of what is your mental model. What is your supply? I call it the supply side view. So you take stock with the tools that are available for that. But once you generate ideas, even before generating ideas, when you generate insights from the customers and the non-customers, even before it is a full-blown idea, you should start to codify that. I'm a very strong believer in codification. It's your pheromone. You need to leave some sort of a proof that we've gone that path. We've explored this idea already with the customers.
As long as it's not a bad smell, Ben. As long as it's not a bad smell.
Well, we can come back to that. I think there's an interesting notion there. But I think this is very important. And of course there are tools. For me, it can be as simple, and this is something I do, like a quick and dirty way. Is every time teams work on projects in companies, I asked them to build a data bank, a database of the ideas they generated. And it's very simple. You like, I said, you can have a tagline for the idea, identify who would be the customer for the idea, and identify Eric. What would this idea eliminate, reduce? What would it increase or create? And then keep that as even as an Excel sheet, and then make sure that collectively people feed into this database. And then you could. I mean, we saw Gore have an AI system to match customer needs with the products they have, but you could have some system just to search, some sort of a Google search into your own internal database of what ideas were generated across the company. So I think this is very important. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful way. I when I was playing, when I played in my career as a professional player, I used to have a notebook that I used to take every note in, but also I used to write ideas into it. And when I look back on it, like it's 20 odd years old, and there's things in there like, for example, because of mobile phones, I was like going a charging station, like a vending machine. And for another example was, I called it the Lion King, and it was a washing line that automatically retracted when it rained and under certain conditions. And they all were very ahead of their time, and nobody could see potential in them then. But when I look back on them, I kind of go, I think they exist. I certainly know the vending machine charging your phone exists. But I think that way, like you sent out those people on the streets of Paris, that is, people have the ideas. They just don't have the framework to be able to sell their ideas, articulate them, or even mental models in which to place them, or business models. So I think that's a huge value from your work. We were over optimistic, Ben. We thought we'd get through Kurza, Bayer, and Samsung as well. I really wanted to cover because of Triz, and we'll get into that the next day. Is there anything you wanted to comment on before we close up today's episode?
No. I was just kind of listening to you, and then realized that we don't have any excuses now, because you had your notebook. It must be very difficult to go back and have to check every page. I remember I had this idea, but where is it? Is it notebook number 9, number 20? But now you have technology that can help you do semantic search. You can search by keywords. You can search your database of. So I ask people to codify not only the ideas, to have a data bank of the ideas that they create, but also the comments that they get from the customers, which are kind of organized in a table. So you can search that table too. You can identify not only the idea, but which customer said what that led to that idea. So I can imagine that with the kind of technologies we have today, if people could maintain the discipline of codifying these and the tools exist. It's just inputting it in the tools, and then let the tool speak, and then they could realize that people have come up already with a solution in a different place of the organization. And I'm sure at some point we'll talk about the system that Bayer had developed called WeSolve, but we'll come back to it
we'll cover that the next day. We'll give everybody something to look forward to. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. So much in this book, and our conversation reflects that. I hope that there's so many moments of pause and reflection, but there's also the tools there. There's the mental models, the business models. There's entire frameworks for how to think about all this. I highly recommend this book. It's absolutely valuable to any business leader. Author of Built to Innovate, Essential Practices to Wire Innovation into Your Company's DNA. Bensaou, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Aidan. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Looking forward to next time already.
And thank you as always to our partner Zai. Zai is a global fintech innovating within its area of expertise, building integrated financial services for digital native and non-native businesses. Check them out at hellozai.com, and I'll see you next week.